What's up everybody, Commander Sanctum here, and today we have a brand new deck tech using Evelyn the Covetous. Evelyn is a 2/5 legendary vampire rogue for 2 colorless, a hybrid blue-black, black, and a hybrid black-red. Evelyn has flash, and whenever Evelyn or another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, exile the top card of each player's library with a collection counter on it. Once each turn, you may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it if it was exiled by an ability you controlled, and you can use mana as though it were any color to cast it. So effectively, whenever a vampire enters the battlefield under your control, you get access to a card from each player's library permanently, with the caveat that you can only cast a card from this pile once per turn. Not only does this allow you to take away resources from your opponents in the form of cards, it grants you access to a plethora of options that you can then use against your opponents or to improve your board state. Since we want to abuse this ability of stealing our opponent's cards as much as possible, we're going to be making a Vampire Kindred deck with some utility cards that get us more Evelyn triggers per vampire. With that, let's get into the card highlights. Since we're making a vampire-themed deck, we, of course, need vampires. Needless to say, there are a ton of different vampires that we can use, since vampires have been a thing in Magic since the very beginning. The specific vampire cards that I will call out are either ones that I personally enjoy playing with or fit very well with the theme, but just know there are a ton of options here, so your mileage may vary. Starting out, we have Don Andres, the Renegade, which is probably just about the best vampire in the deck, since it fits perfectly well with Evelyn's ability. Since we'll have access to tons of our opponent's cards, it is very likely that we'll be able to consistently trigger Don Andres' ability, giving us even more advantage than we already have. Captivating Vampire is a quintessential card in any Vampire Kindred deck, as we're likely to have a ton of vampires on the field at any point in time, which can help us steal our opponent's pesky or annoying creatures they have on their board. Anawan the Rune Sage is great for removal of our opponent's creatures while not affecting ours, since the vast majority of the time we'll only have vampires. Duskmantle Seer, aka Party Bob, is one of my favorite vampire cards of all time, as it can make for some hilarious moments in games. Plus, it is decent card draw, even if it does also give your opponent's cards as well. Olivia Crimson Bride is a great way to reanimate our vampires, which will in turn trigger Evelyn's ability, and since we have quite a few legendary vampires in the deck, we shouldn't have to worry about the reanimated creature's exile effect most of the time. Since a lot of our vampires will likely want to be attacking, Sanctum Seeker is an excellent card to get some more damage on our opponents while giving us life back, a perfect way to offset the life loss from Party Bob. Malakir Bloodwitch and Champion of Dusk are both excellent vampires that care about the number of vampires on the field when they enter, with Malakir Bloodwitch draining our opponents and Champion of Dusk giving us some extra card draw. Crossway Troublemakers makes our attacking vampires virtually unblockable, while giving us a potentially huge amount of life in the process. Even better, it could turn any of our killed vampires into extra card draw for a small price of 2 life, turning a potentially devastating board wipe, for example, into a potential net positive for us. Since Evelyn cares about vampires entering the battlefield, anything we could do to help increase the triggers per vampire entering will be a huge boon for us. Molten Echoes and Reflections of Lichara are great for this, as they both effectively make token copies of our vampires, causing Evelyn to trigger more than once. It's important to note that Evelyn will still trigger even for legendary vampires being copied with these effects, so we still get a bonus out of them entering, even if the token will immediately die due to the legend rule. Alongside the copy effects, we also have some trigger doublers as well. Panharmonicon and Roaming Throne are 2 such cards, doubling Evelyn's trigger for each vampire entering the battlefield. Roaming Throne is particularly nice, since it itself will be a vampire when entering, thus also triggering and doubling Evelyn's ability alone. Flicker effects work very well with Evelyn, since she cares about vampires entering the battlefield, not being cast. Since we don't have access to white, our options are a bit limited, but we do have great options in Displace and Ghostly Flicker. Both of these could flicker up to 2 cards, allowing us to get multiple Evelyn triggers for the low cost of 3 mana. Since these both are instants, they can also be great targeted removal protection, since we could cast them in response to an opponent trying to kill some of our better vampires or Evelyn herself. Finally, we have a few utility cards that work well with vampire-themed decks. Olivia's Wrath makes for a great board wipe since, depending on how many vampires you have out, it may completely wipe all of the opponent's creatures while leaving ours intact. New Blood is a great card that can allow us to take control of one of our opponent's best creatures. While gaining control of the creature will not trigger Evelyn's ability, New blood turning the creature into a vampire is still relevant for cards like Captivating Vampire or Anowon the Rune Sage, making it a very nice bonus. Blood Tribute is a nice thematic card with the vampire deck, allowing us to have an opponent's life total and give it to us. This is particularly great in situations where your opponents are playing a life gain deck, as you can steal a ton of the life they have gained over the course of the game. There are also a few cards that work well with Kindred decks in general. Kindred Dominance is another board wipe that is likely to keep all of our creatures intact while completely wiping out our opponents, without us needing to even have a large number of vampires out on the field. Patriarch's Bidding can be a great reanimation spell to get all of our vampires out of the graveyard and to the battlefield, though this card gets less impressive when your opponents are also playing some sort of Kindred themed deck. Still, all of those vampires you get back will trigger Evelyn's ability, potentially giving you a ton of card advantage in the form of your opponent's spells. Here is the full deck list utilizing all the previously mentioned cards. Additional cards include a ton more useful vampires like Bloodline Necromancer and Patron of the Vein, some control spells like Swansong and Negate since we have access to blue, cards to make our vampires cheaper in Urza's Incubator and Herald's Horn, and additional card draw effects like Vanquisher's Banner and Phyrexian Arena. I absolutely love this deck. This is one of my personal decks that I've had for quite some time now. Vampires are by far my favorite creature type in Magic, and due to that, I've had quite a few Vampire Kindred decks throughout my time playing Magic. To be honest, Evelyn and this deck in general has been my favorite one so far. Being able to cast my opponent's cards, particularly instant speed cards that I could play on their turns, has made each game I've played with this deck completely unique and interesting. While we do lose out on White, which has a ton of good vampire cards due to the Ixalan sets, I believe that Evelyn's ability alone is strong enough to counteract this downside. Not to mention great blue cards like Reflections of Littjara and Don Andrus the Renegade. Once this deck gets going, it can be very hard to stop it. I remember a game I had where I had Evelyn out alongside Panharmonicon and Reflections of Littjara. This meant that every vampire I played not only turned into two separate creatures, but also triggered Evelyn's ability 4 times. I was able to completely overwhelm my opponents with card advantage. Not only that, but I was taking away some of the best cards in their decks and turning those cards against them. I had a plethora of access to additional counter spells, great removal like Path to Exile, additional card draw effects like Harmonize, and so on. Sometimes it almost feels like you're playing with a 400 card 5-color deck due to the access to normally unusable spells that Evelyn can give you. I could pretty much guarantee you that each game you play with this deck will be unique in its own right, simply due to the card pool you'll be able to access during that game. If that sounds like something you're interested in, give this deck a try. From personal experience, I can say that this deck is one of the most fun I've played throughout my time playing Magic, and is one that will be a permanent staple in my collection. I hope you enjoyed watching this deck tech on Evelyn the Covetous. The full deck list outlined in this video can be found at the Architect link at the top of the description. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a like and comment, as well as subscribe to the channel for more Magic content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.